Good morning to all of you. My name is Arushi Rawat, and as an automotive journalist for Financial Express Digital, it gives me an immense pleasure to invite you all for the second edition of the FE Electric Mobility Summit 2022. To formally welcome everyone and also to give you an overview of what FE Electric Mobility Summit 2022 contains for you, may I first welcome Mr. Roshan Pawai to please come on the podium and address the esteemed gathering.
Thanks, Arushi. And good morning, everyone. We are here at the second edition of the FE Electric Mobility Summit. The first one was virtual last year, and it's great to be back in a physical space and actually speaking with human faces rather than on a screen. And the timing of the EV Summit couldn't really be better because as you can see, we live in Delhi NCR and we've been grappling with GRAP norms, with the pollution being what it is these days. And we should be moving to cleaner modes of transport as soon as possible. And that's something that we would be discussing here today on where we stand. So just to give you some stats, in September, electric vehicles made up 5% of the total two-wheeler sales in the country, and that's a phenomenal jump. Last year, there were only about 55,000 electric two-wheelers that were sold in the first half, and this year, it's jumped to 2.78 lakh two-wheelers. And I was just speaking to Mr. Randir Singh a little earlier, and he was saying that this doesn't even cover the entire gamut of electric two-wheelers because it doesn't cover those that don't require a registration, which are 25 kilometers per hour and lower. And it doesn't cover 3 or 4 RTOs, which the Vahan database doesn't have. So that means the number is actually far larger, and that's quite a good thing. As far as four-wheelers go, the passenger car space growth has been good, 260% increase. But yeah, when you compare it to the size of the entire passenger vehicle market, it's still not that big because only about 18,000 electric four-wheelers were sold in the first half. But the whole passenger vehicle market is much larger. Some estimates, India has an estimated 9.6 lakh EVs on road as of now. But there are a lot of challenges still associated with EVs. It's still a very urban phenomena. You have challenges related to the charging infrastructure, challenges related to range anxiety. So we have quite a bit of work more to do when it comes to adopting electric mobility. But when you look at the mobility space overall, I think the larger adoption is going to, of course, come from two-wheelers, and you're already seeing that happening. Last mile delivery, e-commerce deliveries, all of these have moved to electric two-wheelers now. And the three-wheeler space as well. Nearly 50% of new three-wheeler sales are now in the on the electric platform. And then cities like Delhi, Mumbai are slowly moving to electric buses as well, and there's a huge market for that. And along with the whole ecosystem of electric vehicles comes an opportunity for so many ancillaries. I mean, right now you have all the companies geared only towards internal combustion engines, but there's a huge opportunity in battery technology, there's a huge opportunity in charging networks, and then as we were speaking a little earlier, setting the standards for what we're going to adopt as the de facto standard in terms of charging networks and in terms of battery usage, battery chemistry. So all of this and more we will be discussing at the EV Summit today. In fact, Niti Aayog had some projections which puts EV sales penetration in India at 70% for commercial cars by 2030 and 30% for private cars, about 40% for buses and 80% for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So that is a very promising figure, and I hope we can get there. But in the meantime, I think, like I always say, we live in very interesting times. I mean, one day you're thinking, okay, what's my next car? Is it going to be a petrol car? Is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be an electric? And with norms changing every day, I think we live in interesting times. And with that, I welcome you all to the second edition of the Financial Express Electric Mobility Summit. And we look forward to a lot of interesting discussions today. I'm hoping a lot of solutions will be answered. I mean, will be put forth to the questions that we will be putting forth in the different panels that we have today. And so look forward to a very interesting and insightful discussion today. Thank you all for being here, and we shall now carry on with the session. Back to you, Arushi.
Thank you, Mr. Roshan. And that's a great food for thought. Now I would like to request Shri Randhir Singh ji to please come on the podium and share his views on the subject.
First of all, good morning and thank you for having me here. He has already put down some of the figures, and I think from the media industry, you might already be aware about the schemes, the policies which has come out and which are in pipeline even. So I'm not going to talk about those things mainly, but the three very, very important things for which we together needs to work. We means industry, government, and also the academia. All of them has to work together for the three upcoming very, very important things. You know, globally, the automotive segment is going through a shift, and this transition is towards the climate change. This transition is also to tackle the requirement of the capital which is going to develop in the developing economies. You know, overall, whatever finance is coming right now, almost 96% goes in the developed world. Only 4% goes into the developing economies towards this transition. So, you know, the first part, which is very, very important for our country to focus right now onwards, is towards the reuse and the recycling of these lithium-ion batteries. Mainly the ACC batteries is what I'm talking about. You know, globally 6.75 million vehicles are there right now, EVs on road. 286 gigawatt hour of the passenger EVs were deployed in 2021. This is a very, very big number. And how many of these are going to be reused? You know, what is the life cycle of the battery which goes into the vehicle? When it comes to the 80% of its capacity, it has to be put for the second use. When it goes to the 20%, then only it should go to the recycling. But right now, because of, you know, not too much efforts has been made across the world for its reuse, all of these batteries, or I should say major chunk of this battery, is going to be recycled directly without putting it to the reuse. So that means 80% of the capacity which is being remained there in these batteries is not being utilized. It's the underutilization of the resources and also the underutilization of the assets. Battery is a very, very big asset. So much raw material goes into this. All are the critical and the very, very important minerals. And right now we are talking about the, you know, almost 6 times price increase from December 2021 to today, only for the lithium. And cobalt and nickel are like skyrocketing because of the global tensions. So reuse and the recycling is the one which has to be thought right now and to be put in use. We have released the battery management rules recently, but they don't address it completely. We need these things to be put along with the industry, you know, and how the industry can come out together. There are two ways. One is industry people, that means who are operating within the industry, they come together and they decide that this is what the design thinking they are going to deploy. This is how their batteries will be, and this is how they are going to put it for the second use. This is one way. Second way, government and the BIS come out through the standards and the mandates, and they say, please do this. What is the best mode for the industry? Best mode is that they come together, put the brains, put their thoughts together and say, this is how we will develop this market together. In 2 years from now onwards, there will be a huge chunk of batteries which are being used for last 2 years and today, which will come out for, and they will be looking for the recycling, not the reuse, recycling. All of them go for the recycling. But then now is the right time that we have to think about the reuse and the recycling. So we are working with the Green Growth Equity Fund, British High Commission, PwC, Oxford Policy Management and others. So we have released first report about the potential for the recycling in our country 2 months back. And now we are coming out with the second part, wherein we have talked to different recyclers across the world, focusing on the Asia Pacific, which can come to India and do the recycling in. So that report is also ready, and we'll be releasing it soon, maybe another 2 weeks or so. This is number one. Number two area where we have to focus now is the raw material processing for the cells. Very specifically, processing of the raw material. We don't have the raw material, but we can develop the raw material processing, which other countries have done. This is the area, and I won't call it a low-hanging fruit, but if I just put one slice, cathode and the anode. Anode is a low-hanging fruit from the raw material processing. That means we have enough carbon available. Graphitization can be done in our country. Right now, which country does 100% of the anode graphitization? China. 100%. Whatever cells is produced in the world, 100% anode graphitization is done only in China. And this is a low-hanging fruit for us. So, I just sliced this cathode and anode, but from the raw material processing side, both the things can be developed, should be a focus area of ours, now onwards. Third, in 2020, there was one biggest company or biggest automobile manufacturers in the world. They outlined one very, very big difficulty which they are facing in scaling up their EV production. What was the thing? It was the availability of the right skill set people. They were finding it very, very difficult to get the right skilled people. So right now, upskilling, reskilling, and the development of the very specific courses for the capacity building. This is what has to be focused now onwards. We need to have the automotive force which is coming for these jobs to be ready to be absorbed in the industry, and it can only happen with the collaborations. It cannot happen that academia itself cannot do it. It needs the collaboration with the industry. This is upskilling at the level wherein the freshers are going to come. Then we need to do the reskilling of the existing workforce. That is what is also required. And the third part within this capacity building is capacity building of our labs. That is very, very important. All these cells are being manufactured, standards are coming out, we are going to do all these things, but where is the testing facility? There are very, very few labs right now, NABL approved labs, and some of them in IISc and some of the IITs. These labs needs to be developed further and strengthened. So these are the very focused areas about which I wanted to talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh. So now I would like to call upon Dr. Vibha Dhawan, and I would request Dr. Dhawan to take the podium and take the keynote address further.
Thank you so much for having me here. I have made a small presentation, and of course many of the points have already been covered, so I'll more or less flip through them. Really speaking, I'll say that all of you are more expert than me in the field of electric vehicles. I represent TERI, the Energy and Resources Institute, and some of you might be aware of the kind of work we are involved with. TERI is we are going to complete 50 years of our existence, and we were set up by Tata Group of Companies. It was JRD Tata and Darbari Seth. So they discussed way back in 1974, and it was that let's have an institute which will work on the problems that mankind is going to face in the future. And in 74, when no one was talking about renewable energy, that was the time that TERI was set up. And by nature, it is therefore, because it wasn't for profit making, so it's a not for profit making research institution. So I'll give you more as we move around that. The topics which I'm going to cover, so they are basically energy consumption in the transport sector, and as rightly mentioned, it's quite a bit of the total energy which is used for transport sector and ground transport largely. Terry's own experiences and EV landscape in India, and the fact that we really have to go a long way in this particular journey. So I was talking about Terry, and as an institute, if I want to describe in 2 words, it's sustainable development. And we also have a university, Terry School of Advanced Studies, and it's a deemed university. So there we also talk about introducing courses that are required in the market today, because we believe that for any technology to be successful, you need human resource. And what was the new technologies? It is that you have to get the trained manpower created, and therefore we introduce courses at the post-graduation level, as well as the points which Dr. Randhir just mentioned, that you have to do quite a bit of research. How to recycle, it is not something use and throw. It is that because once you throw something, it becomes waste, which is actually wasted. So therefore a lot of research is to be done, and that perhaps is to be done in the academic institutions of excellence. And if we look at the Terry's journey, in 1997, when we all, as a country, we were discussing about the developments made, Terry started discussing more about that, what have we lost in those 50 years in terms of natural resources or otherwise. And that report, the study which was supported by the corporate sector, and I must compliment the corporates for that, was called Green India 2047. And thereafter there was another study which was called Disha, and that was that what are the directions. It's not scaring everyone that it's not going to work, what you are doing is not sustainable. It is that you can do things differently. And that is exactly what we are talking about. We are not saying that go back to the Stone Age, transportation has to take place, we have to cover long distances. It is only that how do you clean, how do you ensure that the transportation is not adding further to the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, if we look at the energy consumption, and we really look into that, whether it is commercial, private taxis, three-wheelers, so it is that the energy mix as a whole, we are depending on coal to some extent, and that is really speaking not so much for the transport sector today. It has disappeared, which was quite a bit in 1950s. So this is the entire journey kind of, and electric is, I should say, the proportion, or rather the total volume from 1950s to till date. There isn't much change, and it has only started happening now. We also look at the low carbon scenario that the transport demands today. We are using both now in passenger, happily petrol and diesel share that is declining, and electricity is increasing. In freight, there is a lot of scope. And I'll also mention about a new project that Terry is initiating, and that is National Center of Excellence on Green Shipping. Because shipping, again, it is something which is maritime, it is international, because all your ships, they travel from India to other countries as well. And cargo, a lot of cargo goes through that. So how do you make it more green? And it's again a very important study. It is not just what kind of renewables you can use, it is also the willingness of passenger to pay. Because here it is that you make your choice. If you are going for an electric car, you don't have to convince anyone. It is you who is initially investing in the car and then also saving. But in case if you are going for other kinds, then it is that there is someone else who has to pay for that service. So those studies also become important. But if we look into the freight sector, it is still very low electric part of it, although gradually if you see the total, the overall energy usage is increasing, but the oil and petrol and diesel is gradually getting replaced by other means. Now, if I look at Terry's own experience, we are, or the fact of the matter remains that the land transport industry is gradually getting shifted to road, and it is about 70% of the freight transport and about 95% of the passenger transport is by road now, which is pretty high. And the overall energy demand for transport will increase 4 times between 2016 and 2050. So it's a huge demand which is going to increase, and therefore it's very important to go clean as much as possible. Why it is all the more important for India, and the last slide in which we have discussed about that the overall energy demand for the transportation is going to go up. Diesel and petrol and diesel is declining, which is a very good sign for our country, because every or more or less the entire fuel is imported today, and that's a big drain on our foreign exchange, and it becomes important to shift to other means and invest in renewables. Now, electric vehicles have a lot of scope, and that is, if we look at the energy generation in India, say compared to that in Germany, because we have a lot of sun, the radiation is good, the cost of generation of solar energy in our country is far lower than that in the Europe or many other parts of the world. So therefore, it becomes all the more competitive or all the more compelling that you are not, first of all, you are saving your foreign exchange, you are not transporting, because ultimately, as rightly mentioned in the beginning, the condition in cities like Delhi, it is suffocating. People are migrating from India to other countries, no more for jobs. There are adequate number of jobs in the country, lots of opportunities in the country, but still people migrate to other parts, and when you ask them, and they'll say the air in India is not good or in Delhi is not good. So we have to reverse this trend, and therefore renewables becomes extremely important. And fortunately, we are blessed, depending on what part of the country we are. We have so many sources of renewable energy. Solar, of course, remains number one, but then we do have wind, we do have hydro, and so on. And there is scope in some parts of geothermal as well. So renewables, it goes without saying that we have to move towards it. And what we have done in TERI is try to explore various sectors and look into what are their potentials which are clearly being brought out. Now, if we look at the transportation of or the EV landscape in India, it is again that if we look at what is the situation today, the share of EVs in Indian vehicle market is still very low compared to many developed and emerging economies. But yes, it is growing pretty fast, and that also demands a couple of things, and very rightly pointed out that it is not that we have to get the technologies from overseas. It is not plug and play model. It is that those technologies, we have to make them suitable for our roads, our requirements, and so on. And that is what is happening at the moment. And I'll say that many of the customers, they are in a way delaying their decision of buying the EV, and they are saying technology is still evolving, and maybe next year we are going to have better models and more competitive in terms of pricing as well. The other thing which becomes important in case of EV is the infrastructure which is required, because you are a little unsure that if I'm taking a road trip, I have to travel long distance. What will happen that if I run out of the total battery storage part. And that hesitancy is there, and of course one is coming up with better models which will take you as much as 400 to 500 kilometers. And when we are talking in terms of developing infrastructure, somewhere it is, will we have electricity if we are talking of 50% of the freight, 50% of the passenger vehicles getting electrified by 2030, from where the electricity is going to come. So, as a responsible government, one is discussing about from where the electricity generation is going to be. We don't want to be again polluting, and it shouldn't be coal based electric generation. It is going to be renewable based generation. And I won't be surprised in that in few years to come, one can even be having a sort of solar panels on the top of the car, so that they keep on generating electricity during the day. But at the same time, it is also that if you are talking about electricity, which is, if I'm not mistaken, equivalent to 25 air conditioners running to charge your car. So we require a lot of electricity, and therefore a lot of infrastructure is to be built around that. Now, of course, all of you are more aware than me in these particular things. If we look at the number of vehicles, and of course the battery cars which are running all around Delhi and all the smaller as well as metros, that number is unaccounted for. But overall also the sales are going up, and this trend I'm sure is going to continue for a long time. If we look at the policy landscape as well, there have been a lot of discussions, and why I'm projecting this slide is to say that in terms of the government initiatives, a lot of initiatives are being taken so as that it is not something which is introduced today and then we are not taking it further. It is more in terms of that it is a well thought about kind of a decision to take it further. In fact, if we look at state level targets, more than 20 states in India have declared their state specific EV policies, and states and UTs with EV targets as percentage of new vehicle registrations, those have been set up, and the volumes, that is what we are just projecting, that what are the volumes, it's on the right side. Now, different states have set targets in terms of some percentage of their bus fleet to be converted to EV by a defined target year, and some states have even set up separate targets for the transition to vehicles owned by government agencies to electric, because that is in a way showing the path. So you set example, you walk on that road first yourself and then you expect others to walk, which is a very positive step. And the states of Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh and Haryana have set a target to convert 100% of their government vehicles to electric vehicles, and of course they have set up targets of their own. Now, when we mentioned about this, of course there are certain barriers, and the foremost being what is being identified today is lack of EV charging stations. The other one is that the chargers, they are different, and therefore one is little hesitant. Lack of unified EV chargers, that is something perhaps required, and we have also seen in case of mobile phones that after so many years now we are moving towards that. So why not to learn from that and right from the beginning go for that. And diverse charging port and battery types make it difficult to cater to a greater number of EVs from one charging or battery swapping stations. The other one is a sort of, I should say, a behavioral hesitancy. And it is something like, what will happen suppose it breaks down on the way? It is, will it really run what is being claimed? So if I'll run out of battery on the road, should I really go for it? Why? So even if you have to carry out a long road trip once in a year, you still go for a petrol vehicle rather than going for an electric. And then the other one is a sort of, we don't know whether it's really going to run. And another thing which I should say we should make it clear to audience, and that is what really goes in the preparation of an electric vehicle. If we do a total life cycle analysis, is it really clean? And what kind of, if my running is 20 kilometers a day, should I go for electric, or I should only go for electric when it's 100 plus kind of range that I have to drive a day? So all these things, so there are some unanswered questions, and which I feel is the responsibility of those who are in electric vehicle manufacturing. They should clear these doubts, otherwise it's not going to do good to many of us. The other one is a sort of grid emissions. Now, when we talk of EVs, they do have zero tailpipe emission, but 70% of India's power demand is still fulfilled by coal-powered thermal power plants, and that causes grid emissions. So really speaking, you are only transferring emissions to a different place than your cities. The other one is peak load EV charging with that will accelerate grid loads. So again, that is something that the electric supply companies will have to work out and ensure that during the peak time, the load demand should not further go up, because then you'll have to create that kind of an infrastructure. And thus, as I said earlier also, that EVs will only make sense when the grid becomes green and electricity is generated through renewable sources. As mentioned, battery is one of the major cost component of the electric vehicle. And lithium battery is most used and preferred type, which is exported. So again, while we are talking of saving our foreign exchange, we will still be spending a lot of foreign exchange in getting these batteries to India. And battery ecosystem, along with battery disposal and recycling in India, is still at a very nascent stage. It is not done by the organized sector, so therefore we are wasting many of the resources which are present over there. Now, when we talk of targets and incentives, we have to make our policies that should align with the vision of realizing EV sales and penetrations. EV purchasers should get priority loan approval, perhaps, from the financial institutions, because let's not look into that it is for an individual. Ultimately, if you use an electric vehicle, you are preserving or saving the environment, and therefore you are doing a service to the nation, you are doing service to your fellow countrymen, you are doing a service to yourself. So therefore, if we are looking for a cleaner planet or cleaner Delhi, perhaps there should be some incentive from the government in terms of getting loans, and maybe at a cheaper rate, so that a large number of people can afford this. And complex problems such as battery swapping or fixed chargers should be solved using an area-based approach, especially in cargo and passenger segment. And one of the low-hanging fruit, of course, is retrofitment of existing ICE vehicles. Of course, before coming for the meeting, I discussed on this point, which is not as simple as I thought till I started the day. But maybe we should again look into it, because in the when you manufacture a car, there are so many other things. You are talking of 700 to 800 kilogram of steel going into it. Steel making again is not a clean process. It's again, it's one of the hard to abate sector in terms of energy usage. So let's still look into this possibility. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your patience, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Dhawan, for such an insightful keynote address. Now I would request Mr. Roshan Pawai to take the session forward with our esteemed guests on stage and take a few questions from the audience.
Actually, listening to Mr. Randir Singh and then Dr. Vibha Dhawan, I think we've all come up with even more questions in our minds now, and that's kind of set the tone for the rest of the day. So I'll take a couple of questions with them, and then I'll throw it open to the audience. If you have questions, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and we'll have a mic come up to you and you can ask your question as well. I think first question I just wanted to ask Mr. Randir Singh. A little earlier we were talking about battery technologies, and as of now the most dominant battery technology is still lithium-ion batteries, which are being used in almost all the EVs that are coming up. Maybe the low-end rickshaws still use lead-acid technology, which is a past technology. Where do you see battery technology going? Because if we continue to pursue lithium-ion, I don't think it does much, at least for India, because we do not have access to the lithium reserves.
So, thank you for posing this question. So, see, in terms of the maturity of the technology, lithium-ion is at right now very commercial stage. This is the technology which is going to dominate for the next 5 years minimum. So when I am saying lithium-ion, so you have different technologies within the lithium-ion also. So NMC and LFP is the one right now which is more dominant. In fact, because of the geopolitical tensions, people are shifting towards the LFP. And going forward, the technologies like lithium sulfur, sodium ion, zinc, air, aluminium air, these technologies are the next pool which is going to come in the market. And of course, some of them like vanadium based technologies, these will dominate the renewable integration. We have to understand from the battery storage perspective, it's not only the mobility. Out of the total bucket of 100, around 42 to 43, out of 100, 42 to 43, that number goes to the mobility. Rest all goes to the three other places: renewable integration, behind the meter application, and the stationary storage, which also includes, at households we use a lot of power. So this includes the total battery storage thing. And the requirement of the battery chemistry, the cycle life and the watt hour per kg of all these 4 sectors is totally different. The batteries which are suitable for the renewable integration might not be suitable for the mobility. You have a different power requirements, the way, we understand the power. So whatever goes inside this and whatever comes out outside this, all those things are different, the energy density and the power which is coming out. So similarly, the batteries are also like this. The power requirement is different, the cycle life requirement is different. So accordingly, the chemistries are also shifting. For example, the vanadium-based chemistry, this is already used in the renewable integration, but that cannot be used for the mobility. Then we will also see in the future the chemistries which will be serving as a generators, like supercapacitors, like the aluminium air. They will not be the ones which will be the primary source, but they will be serving as the generators for other batteries. So these are the chemistries which are going to come out. In fact, we have published 3 reports. Niti Aayog has come out with 3 different reports, 3 different parts for the batteries. Yeah. So wherein we have talked in detail the chemistries which are prevailing right now, the chemistries which will be there in the 5 years from now and 2030 and beyond. In fact, when I talked about the reuse and the recycling, The technology also, that reuse and recycling, that also depends on the basis of what chemistry it is. For example, you may not be able to, recycle the original minerals of the LFP up to 95%, but NMC you can do it right now.
Right.
So this is how the technologies are developing, because it's not only about the segment for which this is targeted, but it is also about the segment which is developing,
Yeah.
coming up in the future.
Right. Dr. Vibhadavan, I wanted to ask you a question. Since Terry looks at the entire ecosystem and where electric mobility is right now, how do you see electric mobility progressing? What are the areas that you think would be most feasible for electric mobility before we get to 100% electrification, which is still way off in the future?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'll say that it may never be 100%, and we'll also have to look into the other technologies which are coming up. And we can't look at any technology in isolation, and I won't be surprised that the way we are researching in the field of hydrogen, and because the target is to have about $1 to $2 per kg of hydrogen production, and if we can work out the entire value chain, maybe that will become in addition to electric mobility. The other point is that, as I have mentioned, because even if we are talking of moving 70, 80, 90% to electric mobility, you require a huge infrastructure. Of course, it is also dependent on the batteries. From where are you going to get lithium? Where are you, and are you going to have other substitutes? So the success of any technology depends on what is going to be the ultimate cost. And right now, electric is little expensive, but there is going to be more of research and a sort of economy of scales, which will reduce the cost. Number two is that, do we have that much of electricity? From where are we going to generate that? Because as a country also, a lot of infrastructure is still to be developed, which will also require a lot of energy. We also have set up targets for ourselves to have 50% by 2030, and then by 2070 more or less, or rather 2050, rather everything coming from the renewables. So this demand of electric vehicles will also require a lot of infrastructure, as well as, and it is feasible, because let's look into the positive side of it. As a country, we have so many days of bright sunlight when we can generate renewables or generate solar energy. But again, for solar, again, it is that you need to have, and of course, Atmanirbhar Bharat and Make it in India slogan, and we are moving towards that we have to make them in India rather than importing from China or other countries. The other thing which is coming up is also efficiency of solar panels, which is going up. So maybe, because solar panels, you again require land. Where are you going to set up those? Right. So that efficiency also has to go up. So it is therefore dependent on many technologies, but I'll say we are moving in the right direction.
Right. We have a couple of audience questions. First, the gentleman at the back. Okay, maybe he can start and then in the next question.
Good morning, everyone.
Just introduce yourself and then ask a question, please.
Myself, Vishal Handa. I am Deputy General Manager with Maruti Suzuki. Thank you very much, the esteemed panelists, for sharing their insight. I have some wonderful information, whatever you have shared today. There are few points which I would like to bring to your notice. Like way back, somebody have given a thought that Terry should be there, because similarly, there is a thought that there was a petroleum universities, many petroleum universities which was established way back with the thinking that there will be a need of a lot of research in those areas. I am coming to a point where would like to bring because you have discussed many kind of chemistries, LFPs, lead acid, then hybrid batteries, then EV battery, not lead acid. I'm just talking about the complete roadmap of the batteries, lead acid, then hybrids, then your EVs, and then various chemistries, then superchargers, capacitors, lot many things we have discussed. There is a battery university in UK. I would like to bring that your attention to that
so the
area.
reports, sorry to interrupt, the reports we published.
Yeah.
So if you see the with whom we talked before publishing all these, battery chemist, the Battery University and the Faraday's Institute.
Yes.
We are in regularly touch with them, and they have actually contributed to this also.
Sir, my expectation and the industry's expectation is that such kind of initiatives by the government, like there are vehicles, then government has made a vehicle scrappage policy. There are batteries which will come into picture. Definitely there are environment people, those who are would like to bring some kind of a policy, not only vehicle scrappage, but the battery research, battery certification agency certified from the government, where industry can take that kind of a approval from that, and then again the scrappage, and then we are thinking for a environment, a complete ecosystem. So that kind of a thing, what are the government initiatives or Niti Aayog or any government regulatory body, so that the whole ecosystem is prone to adapt and move ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
so it's actually everything is covered. So if you are aware from the testing and other parts, talking about the battery in particular, in fact I'll go one step beyond the cells also. BIS standards for the cell testing has also been released. As far as the battery testing and other things are concerned, we have the world's stringent testing standard, AIS 156. And in fact, within this also there is a revision. We have released the new AIS standard of 156 with the updated testing standards, plus AIS 038, that the update to version 2 has also been released. In fact, industry, including the Panasonic, LG and all, they want some time to comply with this. That is how stringent these standards are, in fact the released ones. So this is where the testing standards comes into play for the batteries in particular, in fact of the cells also. This is about this. Now, in fact, for the whatever cells are being imported in India, now UN 38.3 has been made mandatory. That is the world standard, United Nations standard of 38.3, UN 38.3, that has been mandatory. That means whatever is coming into India, in fact, it's not right to say made mandatory now. In fact, for long, whatever cells are being imported, 38.3. In fact, the companies from themselves are making sure that this is how it is being tested. So this is about the standards. Scrappage policy has also come out, that has also been released. So the circular economy gets covered there. In fact, not the right time, but wait for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You may see something in the scrappage policy, I don't know. Okay. So maybe the next leg targeting the scrappage only. So if you see the entire cycle, and as far as the incentives are covered, FAME 2 directly talks about the demand incentives. PLIs talks about the supply and the manufacturing side. So between why I say supply and the manufacturing, the cell is one part, vehicle is another part. If you talk about the cell, advanced chemistry cell program, 18,100 crore rupees, that has already been successful. The capacity for disposal was just 50 gigawatt hour. And you know how much people quoted? 128 gigawatt hour. In fact, your partner Suzuki has set up a 6 gigawatt hour plant. They were in talk with us. 6,700 crores in Gujarat. And before that, they were already producing 1 to 1.5 gigawatt hour of LTO. That factory is also next to your current land, that's Suzuki's plant. So you are also, I don't know whether I should say Maruti Suzuki or not, because that is the Suzuki plant in itself. But definitely the product which is coming out from there, I know where it is going to be used. And people can guess about it. Because it is going to be produced internally. The cost, or so to say the price of that battery would be around $100 per kilowatt hour. And that is the inflection point wherein the total cost of ownership of the vehicle, be it any vehicle. Right now also for the two-wheeler and three-wheeler, TCO of two and three wheelers is either comparable or less than. Why I say this? Because there are different segments within this. You have the 50 or 60,000 or 70,000, 80,000 rupees of two wheelers available. And then you also have 1.5, 1.8, 1.9 lakh rupees of. So that is why I said comparable or lesser, nothing more. TCO, total cost of ownership. And at $100 per kilowatt hour, that inflection point is for the four wheelers also. You understand? So from the policies part, and in fact you have auto PLI, that is the supply part, wherein the parts goes, advanced automotive components. So entire cycle is covered.
Okay. Thanks. The question at the back.
I have a question. See, this is a
just,
concern.
just introduce yourself and then.
My name is Abhijit Chatterjee. I'm from a technology company, Abhi Technologies. So my concern is about, a lot of experts are saying that Indian climate is not actually meant for this battery run vehicles. Well, during last couple of months, we have seen that several accidents happen, like electric vehicle burning, two-wheeler as well as four-wheeler. So in that case, I just want to understand from your perspective, I mean, what should we do if this happens?
The safety standards for EVs, basically.
So that's why I started. There is a revision of AIS 156 and 038 which has been released now. This is one, but anyways, I'll target my answer towards your actual question, that is at 25 degrees centigrade is the temperature at which the cells are currently being tested. And all the cells going across the world, this is the temperature at which all cells are being tested. No matter it goes to the America, it goes to the Netherlands, Europe, India, wherever. So it's not about the cell. This is the cell testing. When cell goes into the vehicle, it doesn't goes like cell. It becomes the module, then the battery pack and all. And there are two type of things which happens when this battery pack goes into the vehicle. You have the BMS, active BMS and the passive BMS. Active BMS maintains the temperature of the cell when it is in operation, charging or the discharging. And what temperature they have to maintain at which it is tested. You understand? So that is how these temperatures and the working life of the cells are being maintained through the active BMS. But when it comes to the question of the passive BMS, which is for the two-wheeler, this is where the technology comes into play. And that is why we have released updated AIS 156 and 038. Maybe there are more technicalities involved. We can talk of this
Question from here. Can you get a mic to this person, please? Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Kiranjit Singh. I am from Strategic Management Solution. Sir, when we talk about the electric mobility, generally limited up to batteries, there are some other component like energy efficient motors. That is also the very critical things which generally people ignore or they don't talk, And energy efficient motors, what is my question, if we are using I2 to I4, like 60% to 80%, there also we can reduce substantially the load on carbon emissions. So is there any policy for the government to make compulsory to use I4 kind of the motors? That is point number one. Point two, in electric motors, major components are coming from China where they are using permanent magnets. And that cost, drastically they are increasing 3 to 4, 5 times also. So that make totally disruption in the supply chain management. Since I am representing one Russian company who come with the innovative, motors which can replace this kind of the thing. So some Indian companies want to go for a new technology. So whether government has some certain incentives or other things. So two questions. One is I1 to I4. Any compulsory? And second, if someone want to go for the new technology, any incentive from the government? Thank you.
So in terms of the motor, neodymium magnets, where it is being manufactured, 100% right now. Who has this critical mineral? Nobody else. You cannot have those magnets produced here. Nevertheless, in terms of I would not say incentivizing, I would say nudging. I talked about the auto PLI. This is where the manufacturing comes. This is where the advanced auto components and the motors are covered here. There are companies like Nidec and all. They have already quoted within this. The total successful companies, so there are two components within the auto PLI. One is champion of champions in parts, and the one is the champions in the vehicle manufacturing. So there are two different components, and these components are covered already in that auto PLI. It's 26,000 plus crore rupees of program. Companies are already, successful bidders are already there. 25 plus around 70, so total 90 plus companies are there. It's already there. It was released by the MHI, Ministry of Heavy Industries. So it is already there. Only thing is, 100 companies have already quoted, and these are the global companies. Advanced auto components, 26,000 crore plus rupees.
Right. We can take probably one more question.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman at the back.
Yeah. First of all, appreciate all your good work, Randir, following it from since some time. So this is Pradeep. I represent OMI Foundation. It's a policy research think tank. So I have a couple of quick questions. So currently, if we see the EV ecosystem in India, we are heavily dependent on few markets for the batteries, right? It's similar like an oil. So there are even questions like, is batteries going to be the new oil? So if we even see the processing side of things, we are at, if I'm not wrong, almost zero. Even if we see the anode and cathode side of things, we're almost zero. So I wanted to understand, even if we get the PLI for 50 gigawatt, which is going to start from 2022, maybe 2024, the first cells going to come out of that, we still need a good security in terms of raw materials, right? Unfortunately, it's still scattered compared to the oil. Like, for example, if you see the cobalt, it's with mostly it's with Congo, where it's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of politics there. If you see the nickel, it's mostly with Indonesia. Lithium, it's with Australia, and again with Indonesia, bits and pieces. And also a bit of Latin America. Wanted to understand how the government of India is trying to secure the raw materials, given that you mentioned that at least for the next 5 years, it's going to be lithium-ion batteries. I did observe that there is ONGC, Khaniji Videsh is trying to establish partnership with Australia and other governments, but can we get some clarity in terms of how are those partnerships in terms of numbers, so that the ecosystem will be more confident in terms of battery manufacturing, so that we have a stable kind of thing. My second question is on the retrofitment side, like for example, in India is heavily a sticker, we need the numbers in terms of sticker price when we choose any two-wheeler or a three-wheeler or four-wheeler, right? So there are already a lot of vehicles on the road, especially in the two-wheeler and three-wheeler segment. Currently, India is almost 80% two-wheeler market, right? So generally, if I buy a two-wheeler, I'll wait for like 7-8 years. Wanted to understand how is the government thinking on the retrofitment of existing two-wheelers, because there are issues like re-registration, issues like insurance, right? How is the government trying to look at streamlining those issues? And I strongly feel government of India should actually give guidelines to state governments and also the RTOs to streamline the process in terms of re-registration and also the insurance kind of clarity. Yeah, I'll pause here. Thanks.
So the first part, if you closely observe the ACC program, there are only 2 milestones within that program. Milestone 1 is the production in 2 years from the letter of award with 25% localization. Second milestone is 5 years from the letter of award for 60% localization. These are only the 2 milestones within this. Why these 2 milestones has been created and why these specific numbers are being fixed? It's the back end work, which goes into what is the possibility of the localization. Up to what parts you can localize, whether, how much time it takes for the processing plant to set up. This is just the processing plant to set up, 5 to 6 years. And then there is a process called validation. So it's not that simple that once you start processing something, the cathode or anode or graphitized material is coming out and immediately you can use it into the cells or the batteries. No, it takes a validation process, which in itself takes 2 to 3 years. And different chemistries have different validation processes. Nevertheless, there are companies in India, in fact, Epsilon Carbon is one of them. They have started doing the graphitization in our country because it is very much available. And that is what the anode part is. I was talking about, 100% graphitization is happening in China, 100%. So when I talked about 286 gigawatt hour of the passenger EVs deployed across the world in 2021, 80% of that across the world, the battery has gone from the Asia itself. To be very specific, 3 different countries and 3 different companies across the world. So we have to focus on the low-hanging fruits first to start with, and that is where the 80% of the localization possible, leaving apart the anode and the cathode part. And that's why those 2 specific conditions, that is where the initial focus is. This is one. Second, you talked about, can you repeat that 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler part?
So Randir wanted to understand on the government's thought process on retrofitment of
Retrofit,
existing
okay,
2 and
understood.
3-wheelers.
So, retrofitting has a different trajectory altogether. When you do the retrofitting, there are issues related to the safety. That is the first part which has to be resolved very clearly. Why clearly? Because who is going to take the ownership? Whether it is the vehicle OEM who is going to take the ownership, battery OEM who is going to take the ownership, or the retrofit kit provider who is going to take the ownership. These are the 3 different people within the EV ecosystem. Who is going to take the ownership? Number 1. Number 2 is very specific standards which says that now this is the vehicle which is actually ready for running this much kilometer, or this is the life of this vehicle. That these are the issues which, not everything has to be left that there should be policy, there should be standard for everything. Industry needs to come out with all these things. Why? Because whenever some regulation or something comes immediately on something which is very, very new, it should not stifle the innovation by the compliance burden. If you have to do this, then definitely you have to do certain compliances. If you don't do those compliances, there has to be an associated penalty in different forms. So when I'm talking about these specific issues related to the safety, related to the standards, there is a standard for the retrofitting right now, but not enough. And then there goes the question of the onus, the responsibility within OEMs, battery, vehicle, retrofit kit provider. You understand? All these things has to be answered.
Yeah. So I think we are out of time. So there will be many more questions which we can take in the networking break, which we will have after the next session. And a lot of these questions that you already have will be probably answered in the sessions to follow. So I would like to thank Randir and Dr. Vibha for being here. This was a very, very interesting session. Many more questions. I'm sure people are going to be asking you in the networking break as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you everyone for your questions, and a big round of applause for our dignitaries on stage.